All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Retro Hoop Collectibles. Very special episode of Retro Hoop Collectibles. We have some guests here that we're going to be talking about, as you guys have probably already seen in the thumbnail or in the title. I've been a fan of both of these guys for a very long time. And some of you also, if you're kind of a fan of my content, there's some cross promoting there that might have happened. That some of these things might have gotten suggested to you as well. But I've been really trying to get on with these two guys. I'm, like I said, a big fan of their contents overall, and have a discussion about kind of some things that are going on recently in the hobby that I kind of feel is a little bit, I don't want to say misleading, but it just doesn't really, things just don't add up for me in particular. And I think these two guests that I have today are kind of in the same boat in terms of some of the content that they put out and some of the labels that they've gotten put on them by some other folks in the hobby. So we'll get right into this. Without further ado, we have Dan, the Card Man, out in Australia. Welcome, buddy. How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
All right. And then we got my man Rahul from AIH Sports. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure watching your content, but it's an even bigger pleasure having you guys on tonight. How are you guys doing?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. So let's get right into it. So there's a little bit of a context on kind of what we want to talk about. We had a little bit of a chat off screen here, but what I want to do is I kind of want to introduce the both of you a little bit more thoroughly. Some folks might already be familiar with your content. Some folks might not. But one of the reasons why I'm such big fans of the both of you is because you guys kind of speak from an area of expertise and oftentimes use that expertise to call out some things that aren't necessarily on the up and up in the hobby. And so I'll start with you, Rahul, because I think your content is some of the content that I've been picking up a lot on recently as well. And talk a little bit about kind of what you go through on your channel, and then maybe some of the expertise that you have in, like, say, your day-to-day life that kind of allows you to speak with a little bit more, I guess, expertise in some of those areas as you're making your content.
First of all, I'd like to say that I loved your channel during the pandemic. It kept me sane. There's a lot of garbage content out there, but yours was one of the few that I loved. So
I appreciate that, man.
Thank you for doing, your channel from an analytical point of view. Really
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you.
All right. So I started this, like you, during the pandemic. I needed to step away from the craziness that was going on in our society. Yep. So I started this blog. I started talking about sports card, my interests. I then tied it into some of my other hobbies, the financial world, and then just my other knowledge that I've acquired through my accounting job. And you said, what's my expertise? So on a day-to-day basis, what I have to do is part of my job. I have to reconcile data that is not correct. And I have to tie between two systems. And this is a time-sensitive issue. I have to do it every day. There's deadlines by 12 o'clock. We have to file for the CME. And long story short, I need to make sure that the numbers are within a certain bound. And if they're not, then I need to do extra digging after the deadline. So what I do on my channel, if I note a discrepancy, then it rings a bell. And then sometimes I ask questions. People are saying, why are you asking questions? Well, this is how I actually get tips from people, right?
Yeah.
On Instagram, people say that, I'm trying to be annoying. No, this is how I get my tips. And then once I do that, I'm able to figure things out. And then someone else sends me information that I wasn't even looking for. So if, I talk a lot about the hanky panky out there. And one of the reasons why I'm able to determine the hanky panky is because they're saying one thing, but then it doesn't tie out. I mean, you could just go numerous places like Twitter. They do something else than what they're saying on YouTube. So just stuff like that. Just find things that don't make sense.
That makes a lot of sense now. As like I said, as I've been consuming some of your content, I knew you had a bit of a finance background, so that explains the accounting piece of things. And then even further, you're reconciling accounts, making sure that the data is correct. And if it's not, then there's some questioning to be done there. And that explains kind of like your more in-depth, like investigative side of kind of what you've done so far in the hobby, which has been great. So good stuff, man. That makes a lot of sense. It clears up a lot of things for me that I was kind of like assuming about you and your background. And now those are kind of now being confirmed. So good stuff, man. Dan, from your end, man, I know we've chatted quite a bit in some of your content, again, very based on some of your background, your professional background. So go into that a little bit for me.
Yeah, so like Rahul, I'm also an accountant, except I work in external audit, and some people might not know what that means, but external auditors are essentially there, these companies that prepare financial statements, and obviously there are auditors for other things as well, but these companies that prepare financial statements, the auditors are there to give comfort to the stakeholders, so shareholders, the market, regulators, so on and so forth, that, the numbers being presented by these businesses are free from material error. So there's some like accounting lingo there, but essentially, the big part of that role is to sit down at the very start of the process and understand, all the key processes that these businesses have in place to make sure the numbers, they're producing are free from error. So it's part of the reason why, I make the content that I do, because I can see sort of this stuff, happening from a hobby perspective, and I can understand, the gaps in the back end, right? So some people might say, again, when you're an accountant, you look at numbers. Well, it's like, no, like let's say I'm auditing a big bank, which is where I specialize in. If I'm looking at their home loan lending process as an example, I literally step through from customer inception all the way until that, loan is paid off. So I see every key step, every key policy, every key control, every key review that's in place. And I determine, is that sufficient? Is it not sufficient? What gaps do you have? What do you need to improve on? Does that give us comfort to, rely on this information? So, I've obviously been a collector all my life. So when I decided to try and start making some content, that's sort of where I focus, because outside of you two, there's not too many other people doing that sort of insight. And when I look at some of these issues with these businesses, like I'll maybe name like PSA as an example, and some of these other ones, manufacturers, I look at them, I can see where the issues are coming from just by looking at these mistakes they're making, so on and so forth. So that's kind of the approach I take. Try and, look at these gaps or see these gaps where I think they might be, and then try and educate, people, the viewers that might not, have that insight themselves.
Yeah. Good stuff. Yeah. I mean, it's especially like recently, there's been a lot going on, right? Kind of in the way of, well, I'll pick on Panini here specifically, right? This whole situation about, the being able to know exactly where the kabooms are and things like that. And from a manufacturing standpoint, I've always believed in this idea of them being able to randomize things as much as possible, right? Especially when things are printed in big bulks, right? Base cards, things like that. But when you start getting down into the numbered stuff and the rare short printed stuff, there really is an ability to kind of figure out where it goes and what boxes it's in and things like that. And you almost want to know where that is as a company. You almost want to keep an eye on where that goes for several other reporting purposes, right? If you are a manufacturer, part of what we used to manufacture in the oil and gas industry was very specific tooling that went out to very specific jobs or went out to very specific areas. And you kind of want to keep an eye on where that stuff ends up and where it lands and things like that. So I've always known from that standpoint that there was something going on there. And maybe I just kind of took a little bit of a naive approach to say, there's no way that they're, doing loaded boxes and things like that. But there's a way that they can do that. There's a way that they can kind of keep up with the serializing and where it's done in the manufacturing and how those sheets are cut. And if you know how master sheets happen and that kind of thing, it's all kind of weird, But to that point, I mean, there's, like you said, folks that are in your position, the internal auditors or the external auditors that come in and audit. I know we were in what they called an API facility. And so we had a license that we had to hold. And that license was predicated on internal auditors coming in and auditing our processes to make sure that we were adhering to the requirements of that license. And so it's a big deal when internal auditors come in. It's a big deal when financial auditors are looking at our paperwork and making sure that our books are lined up properly. And if they're not, then the investigations happen, and there better be root causes that come out of that are clear and succinct. Otherwise, there's going to be some people's heads on the chopping block. And for a lot of people, I don't think they understand that piece of it. And again, it's one of the reasons why I'm such a big fan of both of you guys, is because you guys bring that level of expertise to what you guys do on your channels. And it's something that I feel that as this hobby is left behind, coming out of this big swing up of 2020. There's a bunch of new people that are here to stay.
Yep.
And I really would like for folks who take the same approach that you guys take and that I take to information to be the one educating those folks and not the bad actors, right? Because I don't want to get into names here. We'll put out some names, obviously, for purposes of illustrating our points, but there are some folks out there that are not on the up and up, and as Rahul would say, the hanky panky, right? That's going on, and there's a lot of actors out there that are pushing that kind of agenda, and people that are out there literally to scam a lot of these newcomers. That I think it's important for us to continue doing what we're doing. I'll get into a little bit of collecting stuff. Rahul, PCs type stuff. What are you into?
So as you know, I'm out here in Chicago, so anything Chicago based, except the White
Are you
Sox.
really? I couldn't tell because of the background.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know. It's such a surprise. No Hakeem Olajuwon cards, but
no Hakeem Olajuwon cards. So you're just you're like me, hometown guy.
Yes, exactly.
Anything hometown. Yeah, good stuff. What about you, Dan?
Pretty much everything. Like I've got a lot of Dragon Ball Z stuff behind me. I've got like comic books, figures, collect soccer cards as well. I've got some here that I picked up recently.
There you go.
Some rugby league cards from here in Australia. So this is from our high-end set that just came out, which is good. Anything,
nice.
Right?
I see you got some what is that? Some Nintendo DS stuff back there.
Yeah, that's I think Wii, PlayStation 4. That's Super Nintendo stuff over there.
Oh, look at that! So you're a big gamer.
I collect
too,
everything.
Huh?
Yeah. I literally I'm an obsessive person. I collect.
But yeah, I like to consider myself a bit of a degenerate collector, which it's like anything that you tell me that is cool, and then you tell me, oh, by the way, there's like 6 other versions of this that's just slightly different, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm in. let's go. I want them all. Or if you tell me there's a set of something, it's like that kind of perks my ears up, which is kind of what got me into this whole rainbow set chasing. It's since then I've given up, but that's kind of what initially drew me in. So it's been fun. That's cool, man. I didn't know that you had such a. I thought you were just kind of more into. I've always seen your background there. That was kind of interesting, and I kind of noticed the video games and stuff like that. But you said Dragon Ball and rugby. Yeah, that's not something that's very big here in the States. I would imagine the rugby side of things.
Yeah, no, definitely not.
Big difference between rugby and Aussie rules football, right? Those are 2 different things, right?
Yeah, very different. Yeah.
Okay.
It's hard to explain, but
I went to an Aussie rules football match when I was in Brisbane, and then there's a rugby league here in the States, I think, but it's not. I don't think it's anything.
Yeah, it's quite small.
They
just had the Rugby League World Cup actually, and I think the US were in that, but it's like a very small team. There's no homegrown players, basically. It's very small.
Yeah, I would imagine that's a very outsourced. I mean, the United States is pretty good at outsourcing stuff, so I would imagine that's where a lot of those players came from. I wouldn't imagine there's too many homegrown rugby players in Nashville, Tennessee, or in anywhere in Texas for that matter.
No, it's something they're investing a lot of money in actually, but like whether it clicks, I don't know. It's a hard market to break into.
Yeah, I would imagine so. Good stuff, man. Yeah. So here's the thing. One of the reasons why I wanted to get us together is because obviously not only because I, especially Dan, you and I, and Rahul the same. We've kind of been trying to get together and do some content and stuff like that. And recently there's been a lot of conversation about content creators and some of the content that they're putting out in terms of being seen in a negative light, right? I think there's been a lot of people that are kind of getting tired, right, of hearing about like all these negative things that are going on in the hobby with the the loaded boxes, and then the scandal after scandal with these breakers that are coming to the light, that are doing these shady things and pulling cards and not sending them, and people getting scammed, and just all this stuff going on. And as you guys said, we're in positions where we have a little bit more knowledge on some of these internal things that are happening, and we speak on some of these things and calling them out. And it oftentimes gets, kind of put into this category of being hobby negativity. And really where you're seeing a lot of this stuff, I'm seeing it everywhere, right? On Instagram, there's, pages posting, why all this hobby negativity. There's, other YouTubers as well who have done numerous videos about, there's all this negativity in the hobby. We're going to focus on positivity. And, from my stance, I think that's all well and good, right? I mean, we obviously enjoy the positive aspects of what it is that we do with collecting. Dan, in particular, you're talking about how you got a very broad interest when it comes to your collections. And so, collecting is fun. It's something that we do for fun, that we enjoy. But I think it's important that we make a distinguishing, line here, right? That says what is negativity and what is being informative, right? Because I think those lines get kind of blurred somewhere. So Dan, I'll start with you. In terms of that line, where do you cross that line? Where do you feel like you could potentially be crossing that line between, hey, listen, I'm just trying to inform you of some stuff that I see going on, versus I'm going to be negative and I'm going to put out some negativity type content?
Yeah, I think the line in the sand is essentially with how you're approaching it, right? I think I see negativity as people that are sort of hating for the sake of hating without giving you that substance on why maybe something is wrong and why you need to be made more aware, right? And I think where some of this confusion comes from people is that and I say this all the time, they can't see the forest for the trees, right? They see you talking, in a negative light, and it's not negative, but a negative light around a piece of content, right? Are you saying, okay, this manufacturer has done something wrong? People will say, well, why are you talking about that? Why are you hating on it? Well, it's like you said, you're there to educate people. You're there to explain, okay, this is happening. We just want to make you aware of it so you can make more informed decisions when you go ahead to try and buy the product yourself, or you're choosing which grader you want to go with, or which group submitter you want to go with, all this kind of stuff, right? It needs to be brought to the attention because the positivity side of things, people can see that day in, day out, right? You collect cards, you're buying packs, opening packs, you're seeing the positivity firsthand. This kind of negative stuff that people like to aggregate everything into one that's been happening since the dawn of the hobby, right? It's happening everywhere, right? So it's just the only reason why it's so in your face right now is because people are actually starting to talk about it. So I think the line in the sand is, if you're hating for the sake of hating without any substance, that is the negative element, right? If you're bringing attention to people to make sure, they don't get scammed, they don't get taken advantage of, or you're trying to make a positive change to some of these businesses with, the processes that they have or the communication they're giving you as a customer, that's not negativity in my opinion.
Understood. Yeah, I'm with you on that. How about you, Rahul? What are your thoughts on that?
So earlier this year, I was doing videos, and even before that, where I expected prices of cards would be going down, and people on coming after me. I had a much smaller channel at the time. People kept on coming at me in the comment section. You're negative this, negative that. And then there were some other people on YouTube saying, hey, you're negative this. And I was trying to explain it from an objective point of view. I was saying, hey, look, we're coming out of the pandemic. The Fed's going to raise interest rates. That's not going to be good for prices.
Right.
So people just came right after me. And now, some of those guys have quieted down because that's what has happened.
Yeah.
And then in addition, when you're just bringing to light the item, not the items, but what's going on in the hobby, that's perceived as negative. But ultimately, you have to realize I'm looking at it from an objective point of view. And in my opinion, I don't view that as negativity. Some people may look at that. They don't understand what it is to be an accountant. For me, I have to see, like I told you earlier, I have to reconcile data in a really quick manner. So I have to figure out, hey, what's going wrong and how can I fix this? So that's what I'm trying to do with my videos. And then I think the other issue is that the Good Old Boy Network, I'll just call it them, I'm not going to name names, they, want to hide all the what they deem to be negative aspects of the hobby. But for a hobby to thrive, you need to know what's the good, what's the bad, and what's the in between. And if they hide that, the average person like me is going to be like, whoa, hold up. You just can't be like, hey, everything's great. And then you've seen the card prices. I've seen some card prices go down 9. And I'm like, wait a second. We need to, it sucks for some people, but you have to be objective. And that's what they don't understand. And they just want to sometimes point the finger now at all of us now. I mean, it's just crazy.
And especially if you're, you got some of those folks that have been really listening to a lot of the content creators that have been pumping things up, right? I mean, I know Rahul, a lot of your content my initial the way that I found you was talking about I can't remember the one content creator's name, but a lot about this pump and dump situation, right? Where a lot of these folks are pumping up these cards, and people they have quite a bit of influence, and they've been told to you should be buying this card, right? And here we go. I think one of the things I like about Sports Card Radio is one of their little clips that they keep inserting is where he was saying that I can't remember the name of the quarterback.
Will Greer.
Yeah, Will Greer was a better buy than Kyler Murray. Yeah, it was like, and he was saying it like very matter of fact, right? We're talking, and he was like, "Oh, I think Will Greer is a 25% better buy than and it, like now you're looking back at it and it's such a joke, right? Like it's such, especially for something like as hard as football, right? Where one moment you can be the running back that has the hottest streak, and all it takes is one hit in the wrong spot, and that's a wrap, coach. You're over, and a lot of these things, like you mentioned, Rahul, right, is that you were talking about these scenarios that are like extremely plausible based on all of the markers that you would ever see in any type of other asset market that are about to run out, right? The show is about to be over. There's one of my favorite movies of all time is what's the one movie where I can't remember, The Big Short. I love that movie. I don't know if you guys have seen that movie. It's a great movie. And one of the things they talk about in that movie is there's always markers. Always markers. Oh, well, that's why they call it a bubble, because you can't see it coming. Well, no, you can see it coming. There's always markers. And, to your point, Rahul, right, is that the pandemic, Dan, I think you made the same point, right? The pandemic was a big, influence in cards coming up, people getting free money here in the States with their, with the free money that they were giving out. And then a lot of people just spending a lot of time at home. And, that created something that will never happen again, right? That those set of circumstances will never cross paths ever again. So we won't ever see anything like what we saw in 2019 going into 2020. So that means that it's only got one place to go, and that's down, right? It may be a correction. It may never go down to the point that it was pre-pandemic, right? There may be a new floor to all of this. But to sit there and say that you can predict what cards are going to go up and what cards are going to make you millions of dollars, I've always thought that was a really, like you say, hanky-panky type of move to tell people to buy certain things. And, a lot of people don't realize also is that, this is unregulated. None of this is regulated. If you were to do the exact same thing with a stock, you'd be in serious trouble.
You'd be in a lot of trouble.
You'd go to jail, right? But we're unregulated. So I can tell you to go buy this Des Fitzpatrick and pump it to the moon, dump all of my Des Fitzpatricks on the market and just watch the thing collapse. And nobody's going to come knock on my door. There's no SEC phone call or email that I'm going to get. Nobody cares, right? And I just think that it's still funny that I'm seeing content, even now, from people going, hey, these are the top 5 cards that are going up. And I'm just like, what? Like, even if it was going up for a blip of a second, why would it even matter in the long term?
Exactly.
It baffles me.
There's so many drivers for why a card might go up, right? There's so many factors that you can't predict. And like you said, a player does his ACL and bang, the career's over. Yeah. There's just way too many elements to try and predict it from that perspective. I've always had the mindset as well, like speaking back to the market, things might get back to where they were a little bit, but I don't think it's going to happen. It definitely won't happen in the same way it did, right? Because so many new people entered the hobby that actually had no idea about cards. They had all this free money to spend. They invested in, base cards, getting them graded, spent so much money on crap is essentially what it was. These buyers, if they do stick around within the hobby, they're going to be a bit more educated, right? So when the economy recovers, inflation's under control, interest rates are under control, they're going to shift to, okay, let's go get the players that are actually meaningful. I've got more of an understanding now on what's actually worth the money. So I think for that reason, we'll see prices go up on the high end stuff. But if you think you're going to get over $100 or $20 for a shitty base card again, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, it's not going to pan out for you. The bowl collectors, I like to call them.
Well, they're celebrating as he's a starter now. Is that what it is?
Well, so but again, back to that point, right, Rahul, is that like you just never know, right? I mean, this guy went on a hot streak and then completely tanked, where he got cut from a team. He moved to another team, and now he's doing great. I love basketball. Basketball is my sport. So I love watching that. I love seeing that. I love seeing a player go through issues and have his turmoils and then come back, maybe move to another team. Like right now, one of the things I'm really happy about is Kevin. I don't know if you guys watch basketball or not, but Kevin Porter Jr. right now is doing amazing on the Rockets. And he was an amazing player that was in a bad team with the Cavaliers, who just didn't really do well with handling him properly and things like that. He came down to Houston and he's flourishing. I love seeing shit like that. That's the stuff that I love watching, especially when it plays out on the court an amazing basketball play, right? That's because that's ultimately what I'm in it for. But I was buying Kevin Porter Jr. cards when I first found out that he was coming to the Rockets, which was like 2 seasons ago, when everybody just thought that he was a mentally ill guy who wasn't going to pan out anywhere. And I'm like, you guys have no idea. This guy's an amazing player. Wait till he gets to the Rockets. And now he's a Rocket. So now he's a hometown guy. And Rahul, to your point, right? He falls into this hometown collection that I get to now pick up. And monetarily, I'm doing really well on his cards. But that's not why I bought him. I bought him because he's a Rocket now. He's part of my crew. And that's what I like to collect. And so, I don't know, man. I've always just thought that it was weird, like a hanky-panky type stuff that people are just going, oh, hey, top 5 cards that you need to be buying right now. If anybody's telling you to buy cards right now with any level of certainty, I find that kind of weird. What do you think about that, Rahul?
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually in the opposite right now, where I do believe that card prices, I think Dan was talking about this earlier, that some of the high-end stuff is most likely going to go up maybe in the next 17 months because we've just seen the card prices just tank like crazy.
The dead cat bounce.
What yeah, like the dead cat bounce. This is what it looks like. I mean, in February and March of 2021, you're talking about markers earlier on. And I had a few people on, and one of the guests said that, hey, people are fighting at Target over hobby boxes or just like wax boxes, right? Yeah. And now there's so much supply at Walmart.
Yeah,
exactly. So, and not only that, I don't know if you've noticed that, both of you, have you noticed that some content creators are much more different than they were maybe 10 months ago, 11 months ago?
Oh, yeah.
They're more objective, and somewhat they're sounding like us. To a certain degree.
I wasn't gonna say it that way, but I'm glad that you said it that way, because I agree. There's a lot more people being objective now because there's more to be objective about. Everything isn't sunshine and rainbows, right? All the prices aren't going up anymore. So when you take away that aspect of things, right? You take away this investment aspect, because let's face it, they're not good investments anymore. They're not good quick flips anymore. This whole situation of 10x over a 3-day period, that's gone, right? It's the long game now. So the people that are here to play the long game, okay, there's a difference now, but it takes people to be more objective. And I agree with you, man. I've noticed that as well with some of I don't consume a whole lot of content on YouTube. I got 3 kids, 2 dogs, and a wife. I barely have enough time to make my content, let alone consume. And then, whenever I catch folks that I do subscribe to, like the 2 of you that get to do lives and stuff like that, I try to jump in when I can. But I don't know. I just think it's all funny to me. And this whole thing with grading companies now, that's a whole nother can of worms. I literally tried to explain to my dad what a grading company does, right? Like I try to tell him, like, oh, this is a company that if you look at the card, they'll look at the card and they'll tell you what the condition is. And my dad's like, well, can't you just decide if you like the card? Like, if you think the condition's good, then buy it. And I'm like, well, yeah, but these people tell you. And he's like, well, that's kind of stupid. Like, you can just look at it. Look at it. If you think it's in good condition, buy it. If not, then don't buy it. And I was like, no, Dad, you don't understand. And he's like, no, I understand perfectly. Hey, you're getting screwed out of your money is what's happening. And I'm like, no, Dad, these people, that's their area of expertise. And he's like, how much expertise do you need to look at a piece of cardboard and go, yeah, that's it. It looks pretty good. Yeah, I'll buy it, And I'm like, damn, it really made me question like a whole lot of stuff there. And you guys do quite a bit of content with, grading companies. What are your thoughts on, I'll start with you, Rahul. What are your thoughts on like the current like state of grading just in general?
Well, I'm just thinking, first of all, on eBay or Mercari, I could find cards way less than the cost of grading itself. I mean, what does it cost? What, $15 on the low end with PSA? Is that it?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then CSG, if you're doing bulk, is $12. And I'm still finding deals right now where I could get cards $10 shipped to my home.
Great.
So it doesn't make sense raw to grade.
Yeah.
And unless you have a really nice card, I mean, I've sent all my nice cards to grade already, so there's no point for me to do that. And then if you're trying to buy raw cards right now, aren't those cards probably not the best because people are probably looking at them and saying, hey, no, I'm not.
They would have
I'm just gonna
graded
sell.
them already.
Yeah, they would have graded them already.
Yeah.
Or they didn't get the grade that they wanted. So I'm thinking, do I want to do that, or do I just want to buy cards that are already graded themselves? I mean, I haven't sent cards that are graded in a long time.
Yeah.
I don't know about you guys, what you've done, but
how about you, Dan?
I probably share the same sentiment, to be honest. Like, you can find so many cards on the cheap that people have obviously lost a lot of money on. I just don't think it's worth it at the current price points, alongside, the mistakes they're making as well. And I've always been an advocate for, buying the card, not the holder. I'm a one-touch man for the most part, and it's good to see a lot of people, on social media starting to jump into that now. Like, I do prefer a graded card when I'm buying something, especially on the more expensive side, because it gives me, a little bit of comfort that it is like accurate. But at the same time, the mistakes you've seen lately, how much of that comfort do you actually get? Yeah. Again, I share that same sentiment. It's very strange because if you go back, 5, 6, 7 years ago, people in the hobby had the same sentiment that your dad did, right? What do you need it graded for? Like, just buy a card. The grade gives you a little bit more value, but at the same time, it's not the be or end all. We've just got into this point now, especially with like PSA being the one above all that you need to go to that gives you the most value. You're an idiot if you don't use it. It's like that culture, I think, is going to change as people become a bit more, knowledged in the space as well.
Yeah, I think that's why it's important for us to continue to talk about the things that we're talking about, right? Because one of the big things, I mean, I say this with little to no research being done, but and I'm only saying this because of the amount of flack that I caught. My first ever submission was with I documented here about SGC, and I was sending modern cards to SGC kind of towards the beginning of the pandemic. And I remember the amount of flack that I caught because I did that, right? And they're like, modern card, why are you sending modern cards to SGC? And, I had just got finished having a really, really bad experience with PSA where they, I sent modern cards to PSA, and one of them came back that said evidence of trimming. And it was a NBA hoops base card of Luka Doncic. And they sent it back and they said, oh, you trimmed this. And I'm like, why would I trim a $15? Like, this is stupid like that. So I had a really bad experience with them. And I ended up submitting with SGC, and the amount of flack that I caught was, oh, you're just wasting your money. This is stupid. You should never be sending anything modern. You need to send it to PSA. They're the best for resale value and this, that, and the other and all this other stuff. And while that's still the case, right? It's still the case that, as we all agree, I think I've heard you guys on several occasions agree that PSA is, it's the top of the food chain, right? But I think that PSA has been the top of the food chain based on what they did, not what they're doing, in my opinion. 100%. And so, it used to be that you used to send a $10, $15 raw card to PSA. If it would get a PSA 10, that card would now be worth $60, $70, maybe even $100, right? And so you were able to, and you had some confidence that it was accurately graded and things like that. And I just don't believe that that's the case anymore. And even after that, the number one thing that everybody held on to was resale value. And obviously, with being able to dig into Card Hedge and stuff like that, I've kind of been tracking that resale value, and that window is closing slowly in terms of resale values. So if they're not the number one in resale value, or if not by much at least, and the customer service really isn't the greatest. I think Ty from Bench Clear Media just did a thing about how his cards got like swapped out. Like,
there's a completely different card.
Completely different card. And again, operationally, I've always had issues with PSA, but I just don't know how people still hold on to this sentiment that they are the best option. And I really don't. I've gone on record several times saying that they're not. But and even still, I just did a video where I got back, my Hakeem Olajuwons that I sent off to get authenticated. I still think they're the best when it comes to authenticating signatures and stuff like that. So that's that's my stance with them. But in terms of the hobby itself, we just did this whole thing with PSA. I think Dan, you and I kind of got into that mix really good with Nat and his Jordans and stuff like that. And Rahul, I don't know if you covered that much. I don't think I saw. I think you might have done some on that. Like after,
I did after you guys did it. I did touch base on it.
Yeah.
But I think you guys did the heavy lifting on that.
Yeah. I just we were so I don't know, that entire scenario seemed to me like such a, I don't know, like when I was looking at the tweet, I was like, did he really just tweet this? Like, is this, am I really looking at this card correctly? Am I pulled up the scans, I pulled up the PSA registry scans, and I'm like, no, this is the same card. This is, and I'm just like, but to the point that I think, Dan, you made this point. Had we not said anything, had we not made the like the videos that we made, had contact with Nat, I think Nat reached out to you as well, and I'm just like, had we not said anything, what would have happened there?
Yeah, nothing. Like nothing. So it's just shocking.
But it's very shocking. Had we not said anything, what would have happened? Nothing would have happened. And it just, to me, it opens up a whole can of worms with Nat and what's going on there in terms of not being able to grade his own cards at PSA. That's still something that I haven't talked about at length yet, right? The conflict of interest that's there. And I'll start with you, Rahul. Do you see any way that you could ever feel comfortable with that fact that he can grade with PSA? Is there any circumstance that you would be like, all right, then okay, I'm okay with that?
No, I don't like the fact that he gets his cards graded at PSA. Dan and I talked about this. I also did a video on this. And just me being an accountant and me looking at the financial world as well, conflicts of interest are really big. And the fact is, okay, maybe he's not engaging in the hanky-panky, but if he's allowed to grade, then who else is allowed to grade at PSA? Are the graders allowed to grade their own cards some way, shape, or form? And here's the thing. What if someone told me that the graders aren't allowed to get their cards graded? Okay, what stops them from going through a group submitter and putting the card through? I mean, so it just opens up a can of worms. And, Dan could probably speak more to this, but just from an auditing perspective, that's a red flag. Yeah. And just because Nat Turner may not engage in the hanky-panky, the internal controls are soft. So, if I worked at PSA and I were a grader, I'm like, fine, okay, if I can't get my cards graded, fine, I'll go through a group submitter. Yeah. No one's going to stop me. And what if I'm grading the same card that I submitted? You think that I would be a little more lenient?
Yeah, well, especially a numbered card. Think about that.
Yeah, exactly. A numbered card. Yeah, like a scarce card. You're talking about thousands and thousands of dollars for a high-end card. That's what I would do. And you don't need to publicly show it on Instagram, go through a consignment house. No one's going to know. They just want your business and they don't know your name. I mean, it's easy to engage in the hanky-panky, in my opinion.
It's open. Huh. I didn't think about that whole situation about a number. As you were talking about it right now, I'm like, man, a gold out of 10. There's only 10 of those, right? That could be easily like talked about. Dan, you did quite a bit of coverage on this. What like, is there any circumstances where you would find it acceptable?
No. I think it's just like I think I explained in my videos that, in my line of work, like the conflict of interest, your independence as an individual being questioned around doing something nefarious. It's not so much the fact that you can or can't do it, it's the threat that it can happen, right? So when that perception exists, that's when you need to distance yourself. So whilst it's unfortunate for Nat, like I just don't think the optics of it look very good. Yeah. Because you could have the instance where, okay, well, the market, somebody might ask the question, is he getting preferential treatment? Is he going through a certain process to get things done? Is it going through the same channels? All these things that could make it a bit grey murky mean that it probably shouldn't happen. And I know, some graders, I believe CGC from a comic book perspective don't allow employees to get their books graded. But from that perspective, it's the perception that's everything, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, one of the things, and so this is, we'll kind of talk about this last point that I wanted to bring up with the two of you. A lot. Let me make a statement, and you guys tell me if you agree with me. If there was way more transparency in the hobby, the three of us would have very little content to make.
Yep, 100%.
Exactly.
And I think that's and I believe I like watching you guys' content and watching maybe even some of the content done on Sports Card Radio, which I'm also a very big fan of. I know the both of you have been on his show a couple times, talking about different things. If there was even a smidgen of transparency coming from, let's just call it the collector's umbrella, right? The what is it? Because it's still Collector's Universe.
Yeah, it's Collector's Universe, but
Yeah,
just owned by a bunch
I
of
used
people.
I used to be a stockholder of that. That's another thing that I got into, was buying the stock whenever they went public. But anyway, just some more like part of the reason why people subscribe to my channel, I feel, is because there was little to none, right? None. When I started making my content on publishing the numbers for PSA on a weekly basis, I was doing this on a weekly basis, publishing the numbers on what they were grading based on what the pop reports were doing every month or every week. The PSA was not posting their numbers. I don't think, if I go back and look at the history of their Instagram account or the history of their social media presence at all, I don't think they ever published how much they were putting out. And now even they are publishing, hey, here's what we did last month, that kind of thing, which is a good step in the right direction, right? I think, Dan, you even mentioned it yourself when you covered some of this Nat story, that it was good to see Nat kind of put out a video, right, that said, hey guys, I understand that there's a lot of questions about what's going on here, and I honestly think it was a losing battle for him no matter what. But it was good to see that because he even reached out to me, and he was, we talked a little bit about, that particular situation. And I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. I didn't know that it was in a BGS holder before. I didn't know that this was a crossover. There's so many things that I didn't know about this, that, the level of transparency. So, from have you guys seen any tidbits like that? Because I've seen a little bit, but I don't really, like I said, I don't pay a whole lot of attention to it. But I'll start with you, Dan. In terms of transparency, do you see that kind of turning the corner a little bit in the hobby?
Like definitely a little bit. I don't think there's been enough of it, to be honest. And like the only other thing that I can recall is like Pete from S3C did a couple of videos when they had some issues with some Pokemon cards, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
like that's the kind of stuff we want. And to go, like some other examples would be, okay, why can't PSA put out an updated video of their grading process? This is how it goes. If the cards come in, everything's anonymized. You can't see who the person's card is. Right. These are the reviews we have in place.
Right.
That would give a lot of value to giving comfort, right? And the same thing with manufacturers. Why can't Panini go out and say, you know what, this is how our cards are manufactured. This is how, like the whole Kaboom situation, right? Just to quickly go back to that, a statement from them, and again, it is a losing battle, like you said, but them to say, you know what, it's physically impossible for this to happen for X, Y, Z, that would give some comfort to the market. Yeah. I just don't know why they don't want to communicate. And I know companies in general don't like to be overly transparent, but you need more of it, especially now when some of this, money that we're seeing within the hobby is starting to blow up. And I talk about this all the time as well, that, these businesses, it was a hobby, right? It still is a hobby, but the money 5-10 years ago was like peanuts compared to what it is now.
Right.
So they've kept their processes almost the same, but they're happy to take all this additional money from us. It's like, well, no, you've now gone to a multi-billion-dollar industry. You need to have reviews, transparency, communication in place to now to meet that level of funding, right? You can't get away with doing the stuff you're doing before because the volume's too much, the money's too much. You need to be more transparent. And we've seen little snippets, like you said, to make it a bit more improved, but it needs to be a lot better. It's nowhere near good enough.
What about you, Rahul? You get any warm and fuzzies about the hobby being transparent in the future?
Well, I do appreciate Nat Turner returning DMs if I've messaged him. Now, it may not be.
I've heard about that. I've heard that he's really good about that. Sorry to cut you off, but I think that's one of the things I've heard from numerous people, that if you message him on Instagram, if you message him on Facebook, I think he might have a Facebook out there, he will message back.
Yeah, that's really strange for a CEO to do. So I do give him props for that. As much as I have critiqued him, I will give him, respect, because try getting hold of the Beckett CEO. I don't know where this dude is.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't think anybody knows where Beckett is, period.
Yeah. Exactly. So they do have better line of communication than Beckett. Now, I am critical, though, of PSA. On YouTube, social media, there are influencers who are either employees or that have some sort of association with them, have advertisement. I have nothing against people doing advertisements, but I'm just saying that the conflicts of interest out there for people to cover PSA or collectors in an objective manner, and also other Instagram accounts that I believe that are in the camp of collectors. I think that's where that improvement needs to occur. And obviously, you know, if people are on the payroll, you know, you're not going to see that objective information coming out, especially for this type of big company out there. So Nat Turner is doing an all right job. Now, I do think that he needs to take it to another level, because there's a lot of questions right now in the hobby, and a lot of what people call negativity. To quell it down, you know, there needs to be some solutions. For instance, you know, there's some alleged trim cards out there. Well, what's going on with that? I've done in some videos and no response from
nothing.
So, yeah.
Or Nat responding to Dan's Jordan questions, except the one that is probably like the shadiest.
And then tell me we shouldn't grade cards over
and then tell me we shouldn't.
Like, well, you responded over the freaking internet, mate. What are you talking about?
Oh man, when I saw that, I was like, wow. The most egregious one is the one that he was like, "Hey, listen, guys, let's just stop talking about that. Why are we grading cards?" It's like, well, because if you know anything about that card's pretty chipped up in that PSA 10 holder, buddy. But we'll let it.
So
Yeah, like, what do you think that? What do you
So-
think that he knows and that he's not disclosing? I'd like to know that.
You know what's funny? So when I first did that video, I never, guys, listen, never in a million years, right, that I think that I would ever be getting an email from Nat Turner, you know, to my Retro Hoops account. And it was funny because he sends me the email right initially when I did the video, and he's like, "Hey man, you know, like, you can reach out and holler at me if you got some questions or something before you make a video. You know, I'll be happy to do whatever." And I'm like, I'm looking at this, I'm looking at my phone, and I'm talking to my wife, and I'm like, "Hey, I just got an email from Nat Turner," and she's like, "Nat Turner? Who's Nat Turner?" I said, "That's like the guy that owns PSA." And she's like, "What?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So my first initial response to Nat Turner was like, "Holy shit, man, you watch my channel? No way." I was like, never in a million years did I think that Nat Turner was going to be watching my channel. And, you know, to his point, I mean, to your point, Rahul, right? He messaged back and he was like, "Listen, man, you know, yeah, there's a bunch of stuff going on with this one. It's kind of weird. Yeah, I see what you're saying. This is kind of funky, but, you know, it wasn't a BGS holder. It got, you know, cracked and crossed over, and, you know, all the other stuff." And then just kind of subsequently what took place after that, right? Which is, you know, the content that came out, and I think a lot of folks picked it up and did quite a bit of stuff on it. But I just, you know, again, at the end of the day, I think, and I've commented this on a couple of both of you guys' videos, is and you know, some bench clear stuff as well. Transparency.
Yep.
Right. I think the fact that neither of these companies are saying anything speaks absolute volumes, right? And to both of you guys, I mean, it's funny. I already knew Dan was kind of in the auditing side of his profession, but now knowing, Rahul, that you're kind of in the same boat with the financial auditing side of things, it now makes sense to why you guys have such tenacity when it comes to this kind of stuff, because you're used to questioning, right? And when you guys question, Dan, you being an internal auditor or external auditor, and Rahul, you being a financial auditor, you expect answers because you guys are serving sort of regulatory body type functions, right? Where you're sort of an authority there that's meant to be there to ask those questions. And by way of your titles and your positions, you are entitled to answers. You need answers for this stuff. And it's funny that, you know, because I'm in kind of the same boat, right? Where I'm asking these questions and I'm like, "Hey, we want an answer. Why aren't you answering my question?" And you know, the fact that the silence remains there kind of speaks volumes. So hopefully it gets better. I'll kind of answer that question myself, where I'm saying I'm seeing a little bit more glimpses, you know, with PSA posting more about what they're doing and things like that. I really wish PSA would have a YouTube channel, right, that documents, you know, their processes to an extent that they can feel comfortable documenting those processes, right? Because obviously, as we all know, there's internal processes. You don't give the recipes out, right? I mean, like, you know, there's certain proprietary things that I'm pretty sure that they're doing that they don't want to talk about. You know, we got a little taste of Genamint, right? And then all of a sudden it just kind of fell off the radar. Nobody's talking about Genamint anymore. You know, are they using Genamint? Are they not? You know, how much of it is in play? How much of it is actually being used? I think, you know, Nat may have made a couple of comments in the past about it, but again, it's all in passing, right? And these are all things that really are affecting. I mean, if people are really feeling like the grades that they're getting aren't correct anymore, that gentleman, if they're using it, that may be why. And that's all we're saying is tell us what's going on.
Yep.
And we're just getting nothing. And I think that's where folks like us who have platforms, can talk about them and try to demand answers, and then ultimately get called negative, right?
Yeah. Well, I think part of the reason on that as well, just because there's a point I wanted to talk to earlier, I think there's a lot of people within the hobby that don't actually care about the card that they've had graded, right? Everybody's still interested in that quick flip. And I think that drives a lot of the reason why this stuff doesn't get picked up, which is probably part of the reason why these businesses don't talk about these kinds of things as much, because they're still getting through 1 million cards a month or whatever it is, right? I haven't looked at the numbers recently, but people are still interested in that quick flip. And it's always funny to watch that dance between people at shows and stuff, because they're both talking about a prospect, and they're both hyping up this player, they're both hyping up this card, when the guy selling it knows that he doesn't really believe in that, so that's why he wants to sell it. And the guy buying it has the same sentiment because he's going to go sell it to somebody else to make
right.
a 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, he's going to move 2 or 3 tables down, try to flip it for $10, that kind of thing.
So I think it's just because the average person doesn't care, but I think we're definitely getting more buy-in into that sort of space. And like you said, if they had a channel, gave a bit more context to some of this stuff, I think they'd go a long way. And one point I wanted to make as well is to PSA, or not to PSA's credit, but to the rest of their competitors and to the rest of Panini's competitors, not much has happened in terms of their competitors being more transparent either. Like SGC have done a little bit, but the fact that PSA could get to where they are, given the mistakes they've made, and not see anyone close in as much as probably they should have, in my opinion, is a bit of a letdown on their part. Same with BGS. Like BGS have done almost nothing for 3 years. So, yeah, a lot to improve on. I just hope they start being a bit more transparent and start holding things, a bit more accountable.
Yeah, almost a little over 1 million cards in the month of October, which is insane.
It's ridiculous volume. And I would love to understand what their grading process actually look like, because there's a bit of confusion as to, how many people look at one card. Does it go through 2 people? Does it go through 1?
How many cards? How many cards do they grade a day? Each grader.
Yeah. That's
Someone told me 500, 600. I'm like, whoa, that's insane. But I can't confirm or deny that.
Yeah. So if you're doing the math on that, I mean, obviously the one variable that I could never get nailed down was how many graders, right? Because that was always the big unknown. How many graders you guys got sitting there actually grading cards? And if we were to ask Nat that question, and he would say, "Oh man, we got 50 graders." Well, hold on, champ. You got 50 graders, and they're burning out 1 million cards a month. How are you guys looking at those cards? Like literally, you're just going, all right, good. All right, good. There's no way mathematically, right, that it can. I think I backed into a number one time on one of my videos a while back, and the math came out to like 15 seconds a card or 20 seconds a card. If they had, I think it was like 500 graders or something like that. I don't remember what the gorilla math that I came up with, but I backed into a number somehow based on an article that had come out that Nat Turner did an interview where he kind of, funkied up a number somewhere. I think it was maybe like the total number for all the PSA employees, but I made some assumptions there and kind of backed into a number somehow. But yeah, we're talking seconds a card. Yeah. And, and I think somebody actually pointed out that I missed the variable that they look at every card. I think they said 2 or 3 times.
That's the question mark. I'd be shocked if they're not leveraging what's called a 4-eye check, where you've got 2 sets of eyes looking at the same card. My understanding was, you had a card, okay, one person looks at it, a second person looks at it independently without knowing the grade the first person gave. If there's a material difference between the two, then a third person has to come in and be the deciding factor. Again, the third person looks at it independently. Like me as an external auditor, that's what I'd be expecting from them, right? And then on top of that, you'd say, okay, well, that 6-eye check, that third person coming in, works, but what happens if the 2 people that looked at the card give the same grade but they've both made the mistake? Well, then you'd also say, you know what, why can't we pick a sample of every single grader, pick 5% of all the cards they grade that month, we obviously pick them on random days and say, okay, get somebody else to check it then, right?
Yeah,
these are all the things you'd expect to be happening to make the process robust. I'd be shocked and I'd be raising lots of questions over their process if it's only one person looking at each card, because if that's happening, that's shocking.
But don't they have quality control where someone is overseeing these cards? Like, don't they have like a remember the queue that they have on their website? It's like, okay, your card
Yeah.
has arrived, and it goes to the next process, and then
That's a good point.
you must have it on your website. I haven't used PSA in a while, but
So
there's
I have an order over there with them right now that has been there for quite some time, and it's frustrating. So yeah, you're right. It's grading, and then assembly, and then QA check 1, QA check 2. So yeah, this is funny. Again, right? The expertise coming in here, right? And I'm just so there's a difference between quality control and quality assurance, right? The difference is that quality control is on the inbound side, right? You're making sure that the materials that you have are coming in and that you're controlling the level of quality that gets into your building. Quality assurance is making sure that what goes out your door is at a certain quality level, and you're assuring your customer that they're getting a certain quality item, right? There is no quality control here, but there is quality assurance on the outside. So there's arrived, order prep, research ID, grading, assembly, right? Assembly. So there's no quality checks here.
Yeah.
The quality checks are on the out. And
Yeah.
I guarantee you that quality check that's on the out is looking to make sure that the label is printed correctly and that the slab is sealed properly. I would imagine that those are the two things that they're looking at.
And also maybe just making sure that card matches the customer's submission. That'd be my expectation as well.
Yes, I would imagine so. Yeah.
So I'd love for them to do a video, to be honest, because that would give a lot of comfort, right? If they could just walk us through in a bit more. I know there's some things out there, but it's not in enough detail. If I could see it,
from like the 90s, isn't it?
Yeah, it's old as shit. Yeah. But it'd be good to have that content or that context, because that would give a lot more comfort to people asking these questions. Because then it becomes, a training improvement point on maybe these graders just making mistakes, right? And maybe these people need to be trained a little bit further, as opposed to having a poor control environment. Because if they've got a poor control environment, that's a huge issue for them as a business.
Yeah, that's a systemic issue.
Like, it doesn't matter, like volume. And this is why it makes me think the control environment needs to be improved, because volume obviously makes things grow. Well, that's what volume is. I'm talking circles now, but as you increase volume, right, you expect more mistakes, but not to grow exponentially, right? And if the control environment's poor, you're going to see exponential error rates. And that's what I think is probably happening, because they've maybe gone too quickly without fixing what needs to be fixed first.
You're gonna jump in there, Ro?
Yeah. So I think one point that we didn't even bring up is a private equity guy, and his other business partner is Steve Cohn, a hedge fund guy that owns the Mets. So there's nothing wrong in making money, but ultimately in private equity, you need to make the most amount of money to satisfy, the amount of investment that you put in. So in terms of quality control, I don't think they really give a rat, because they're just trying to make the most amount of money, because they bought at, I think, a high valuation. They bought at what, $90 a share?
Something like that.
Yeah. So I'm thinking, wait, they have
I did pretty good on
backlog.
Collectors Universe.
What happened?
I said I did pretty good on Collectors Universe.
Yeah, I'm sure you did.
yeah, that was interesting, man. But yeah, I agree. Quality control is just not one of those things that you really want to be paying a lot of money on if you're an equity firm.
Yeah, coupled with the fact that, like I said a bit earlier, you've got people that generally don't care. Like I'd say the vast majority of people are just looking for that quick flip, so they don't care about the issues, right? You see these issues, they send you back the wrong card, you're still going to submit to PSA. So it's sort of win-win for them at the moment. They're basically printing money.
That's a whole other thing that I'm really going to start driving to in the next maybe couple of months or so, is this idea of resubmitting to PSA. Like you get a 7, right? You thought you should have got a 10, you get a 7, you crack it and resubmit it to the same guys that just got finished giving you a 7 on that card. Anyway, we'll go.
Here's the thing about that, though. In terms of numbered cards, I believe PSA is cracking down on that.
Are they really?
Yeah, because I saw one of my followers, Hobby Champs, and I think he got into it with Nat Turner one of these days. They're arguing about something else, but he showed me. I think they were talking about one example of a numbered card, and then it was re-cracked and sent out. Say they wouldn't grade it because they're keeping track. But in terms of gem and mint, I don't think they're using that technology, because I've heard that people are cracking their slabs and still sending them out. But in
Still
terms
getting
of
them
numbered
graded?
cards, what happened?
They're getting them graded again.
Yeah, but numbered cards, I don't think PSA, if they're keeping proper records, they're grading those. And I think Nat Turner confirmed that in one of his responses to Hobby Champs, if I remember correctly.
I would imagine that's an easy thing to keep track of, right?
Yeah, it's not that hard.
Same with like patch stop cards as well. Like they've missed those a couple of times, and I think again for serial numbered cards that do have patches in them, that's a pretty big thing to miss and an easy thing to track. Just have a database that your employees can quickly search. Is this the same card? Has it come in before? Is the patch different? Like that should be part of their check.
Yeah. I think there's a whole website dedicated to that, right? For RPAs.
Yeah, Wax Museum Podcast has got a really good one. That tracks the RPAs.
Yeah, where he tracks RPAs, every RPA, or I mean, whatever RPAs you can get pictures of and stuff like that. And a lot of good investigation has come from that, where they're like, whoa, wait a second. When I saw this card in a BGS 8, 2 years ago, it had this patch, but now it's in a PSA 10 and it's got this patch. What's going on here? That kind of thing.
It'd be good to try and resubmit stuff to PSA. Like I'm not sure if you saw today, somebody had an SGC4. Forget who the player was.
Oh, I saw that.
They've got a PSA 9.
Yes, an SGC4. They got cracked and resubmitted to PSA. PSA gave it a PSA 9, and it turns out that the reason why SGC gave it an SGC4 is because it has a huge print defect that PSA completely missed. I literally, Dan, when you popped up, that's what I was watching.
Okay,
yeah. So I'm gonna go back and look at that one, because that one was really interesting.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the details on it, but that's the kind of the I guess the clickbait thing on that. Well, listen, guys, I know you got Dan. What is it like? It's already Tuesday or Wednesday over there.
Yeah, 2 p.m. I'm on my lunch break.
Well, there you go. Well, listen, I don't want to hold you guys up much longer, man. I can't really thank you guys enough for coming on. I really appreciate you guys taking the time and the conversation. Hopefully we get to do a little bit more of this as time goes on, and we get some more things to kind of go over and talk about. But I want to take an opportunity to tell you guys again how much I really enjoy you guys' content, how much I really appreciate what you guys are doing out here in terms of trying to keep people informed, and now hopefully people understand a little bit more your individual areas of expertise, and honestly why people should listen to you guys a lot more. And I just can't thank you enough. So I'll give you guys a minute or two, each of you, to kind of plug your own channels. I'm obviously going to have all the stuff down in the comments below, but Rahul, I'll start with you. Where can folks find you and follow you and engage in your content?
Just go on YouTube, just type in AIH Sports, and on Instagram, find me at AIH_sports.
Right on. Dan, how about you, man?
Yeah, same thing. Just go on YouTube, Instagram, Dan the Card Man. You'll find me.
Dan the Card Man. Again, guys, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it, man. We'll get together soon. And thanks, everybody, for watching. We really appreciate it. Leave us a comment down below. Any questions that you got for any one of these guys. I'm pretty sure they'll be in the comments checking out and responding and all that good stuff. They've been very good about doing that on their own channel. So just like me, they like to interact in the comments. So like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. You guys know I never talk about that crap. But Dan, Rahul, thank you guys. Appreciate the time. And you guys, we'll talk soon.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, guys.